Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to see my talk here. Thanks, Scott, for the introduction. Didn't really recognize myself. So I'm delighted to be speaking with you today. Got an interesting topic, hopefully, to talk about, very much on theme for the conference around risk and resilience. I've been with Maersk Drilling almost 3 years to the date, actually, and it was just at the start of a very interesting period. So I got quite a lot of cover, so let me just jump straight in. There we go. So just to quickly give you a bit of background on who is Maersk Drilling. We're an oil and gas drilling services provider, and we work for oil and gas clients around the world. So perhaps a departure for some of the sustainability topics that we've talked about, but it's very much part of our agenda as well. And I want to talk to you about some of the things that we've done as supply chain, hopefully, and how that impacts our sustainability agenda. We were founded in 1972, so it's our 50th year anniversary this year, and we have over 2,500 employees, the majority of whom work offshore. So quite an interesting environment to work in. And we have 19 rigs that operate globally across the world, North Sea, Gulf of Mexico, West Coast of Australia, and everything in between. A little bit about the history of Maersk Drilling. Founded in 1972, and the oil and gas industry, for those of you who know it, is a relatively slow-moving industry. So for 47 years, it's had steady development, growth, new rigs, new frontiers, just steady, really. And then in 2019, everything kind of accelerated for Maersk Drilling as an organization. In 2019, as part of the Maersk Group transformation that it was undergoing, it was decided that Maersk Drilling would actually separate, so demerge, to become a standalone and separately listed organization. So change number one for Maersk Drilling. 2020, I think we're all very painfully aware what happened in 2020 with the global pandemic. Change number two towards both Maersk Drilling and the industry. And in 2021, towards the end of it, quarter four, we announced a merger with Noble Drilling. So change number three. So I basically joined at the start of that, and it's really felt that someone's picked up the company, shaken it around, and put it down, and did it again another 2 more times. So it's quite an interesting environment to be working in. So what do we do? How do we deal with it? So the demerger, absolutely, if we go back to 2019, kick-started the transformation that we've undergone in our supply chain. And I'm going to use the framework that we all know, people, process, and systems, just to sort of take you through what are those things. So let's start with our people, our most important asset. Being part of the group, obviously, there was people working to support the Maersk Drilling supply chain. But of course, we couldn't do that anymore. So we had to create a standalone, independent, and very capable supply chain organization. And as part of that, we also decided to change our global footprint from having employees and colleagues based in multiple locations. We transitioned over 80% of our supply chain roles to a new global hub we set up in Gdansk in Poland. On the process side, again, we're a new standalone independent organization. We had to relook at our contracts and our agreements with our suppliers. We had to build a new approach towards inventory management. And one of our objectives was we wanted to ensure that we had 100% spend coverage, and our procure-to-pay process was tailored towards the needs of the offshore industry. So not just buying parts and equipment, but also services, crew, medical requirements, but also being able to support indirect procurement as well. So really just trying to ensure that we had the right setup for our industry. And then finally, we did a lot of work around standardizing our processes. On the system side, again, we need to ensure that the system landscape was fit for purpose, make some specific investments and changes. And we also moved towards being much more data-driven and being better at our performance management, so we knew what was going on. So let me talk about our people in our organization. So we started or in 2018, 2019, the organization was quite fragmented. So pockets of supply chain activity going on in lots of different parts of the Maersk Drilling organization. So we decided we needed to change that, and we created a standalone function, and many of you will recognize that kind of functional setup within supply chain. And there were three legs to it. We had the operational supply chain team, who focused very much on the day-to-day business, managing our global logistics, ensuring our purchase orders are being placed. And then we did a lot of work standardizing and centralizing how they work. Our category management teams, very much focusing on not just the direct, not just focusing on the direct sourcing, but also indirect sourcing and procurement, but also changing its focus from just being in the background, but to be market-facing as well, supporting our commercial activities. And then finally, on the inventory management and the warehousing, it was very good as a standalone and listed organization. You realize that we need to ensure we have balance sheet reliability. So we need to have accountability for our inventory globally. And we also need to make sure that we had the right warehouse footprint for that as well. Because when I started, we had over 40 warehouse locations. And quite often when I'd ask a question, do you know where this stuff is? Not so much. So we did a lot of work around transforming our warehouse setup as well, so we had the right footprint. So all of these hopefully has put in the place for our people and our organization to be able to support our offshore colleagues primarily. The second step, which I've alluded to, was actually we moved very much from our decentralized organization located in places like Manila, Houston, Singapore, Aberdeen, Stavanger, and we moved them to Gdansk. And we set up a brand new office, which is also part of a broader transformation within Maersk Drilling to set up an organization called Global Business Services, which covered finance, IT, HR and crewing, but also supply chain, because supply chain works with all of those functions to deliver what we need to do to our crews offshore to deliver our business towards our customers. So we moved all of those people, and it was obviously not everybody could move across the world. So we had an organization that changed by over 85%. So we recruited a whole new organization basically 3 years ago, and we're now running our supply chain function primarily out of our offices in Gdansk. And we look to do that to create a much more centralized way of working, but also a model that we can scale in line with our business ebbing and flowing. But then also being co-located with those other functions that we talked about, it's really allowing us to have better collaboration and I think drive much more improvement on an ongoing basis. So that's what happened to our organization. In terms of some of our process areas, so my focus was obviously inventory, whilst being part of this overall transformation. And it's fair to say we really did start at the beginning. And obviously we talked about needing financial certainty, knowing what we have, where we have, and how much it was valued. That is basically what I started in 2019. And I was surprised, but it was a great challenge. So we really started with putting in the basics around how do we manage inventory well. We then identified, of course, these are the good things that we need to do. We're all good supply chain professionals. But of course, as part of 2020, what that made us realize is we really needed to accelerate our plans. Because of course, like many industries and many companies, we had to ensure that we would survive beyond the pandemic. So our focus very much in 2020 was around driving cost saving, using our inventory in the best possible way, basically trying to make sure we could preserve and support our financial performance. So that was very much the focus on our inventory to make sure that we really started to use the surplus inventory, looking in all the nooks and crannies and cardboard, and the cupboards that we know people store inventory. But then we also looking at our warehouse footprint. Can we be much more efficient and optimal? Can we drive some cost saving by having less locations and then use those better? So that was a lot of what we did during 2020. And then as we moved into 2021 and now we're in 2022, I would say we're much more in a run phase. And we're still continuing to change, but it's kind of incremental changes. And it's been quite a journey. my team has been fantastic. And the organization I put up there has been one of the key things that has helped us achieve that. It's really by getting the right people with the right capabilities in the right roles. That's really helped us drive the transformation. And the other thing to highlight is we couldn't have done it without the collaboration both with our other colleagues in supply chain and these functions, but also our colleagues in the operational divisions, because for them, inventory is a safety blanket. When I started talking about, well, I think we could probably do with a little less inventory or different inventory, I started to use the term, no, it's not about inventory reduction, it's about right-sizing the inventory, right? So that's what we spent a lot of time doing, and it was that collaboration with the other parts of the business that has really allowed us to be successful. The other part of the business where we spent time to improve our capabilities and maturity was around category management. And I just came from Graham's presentation next door, an ex-colleague. We used to work together, and he had lots of matrices. It was nice to see. So, of course, we did the classic 2x2 segmentation, where we identified our strategic suppliers, and we identified 19 suppliers are the ones that are responsible for 80% of our spend. So kind of like a 80-20 split. And then we've really put our efforts working with those 19 suppliers, and in two dimensions. One is around the enabling activities, just ensuring we have the right contracts with the right terms. There's been a lot of discussion about sustainability and sustainable sourcing in this conference. That's very much part of our approaches with our suppliers as well. It's about having the right SRM, it's having the right follow-ups and discussions. And that then created the basis for the second dimension that we now have with our category management team, is really the market-facing activities. We're very much integrated with our commercial teams, so we support our bids. Last year, the team supported 60 bids that we got from the market. But we also help our operations to start up in all the different countries. And last year, we started up in 9 new countries. And right now, we're starting up in Brazil. And our category management teams, our procurement teams, we go to those countries, we identify local suppliers, we have local content requirements from both our customers and also the governments. And so we spend a lot of time ensuring that we can operate well in those different countries. And then also on the market-facing side, we've also tried to focus our change as a business from being a commodity deliverer of drilling services to be a deliverer of integrated services as well. So our clients can just come to us, and we take care for a wider portfolio of activity than them having to go to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different service providers. So we've really tried to change the way we go to market, both as a company, but also be able to respond to that from a supply chain organization perspective as well. So that's broadly what happened on the process side. And then on the system side, we made some specific investments in tools. So we have a company-wide ERP system, IFS, but then we also made some investments in tools to support our procure-to-pay process, and we made some investments in terms of Cooper and Green Meadow to support our sourcing and category management activities as well. So again, to try and drive further standardization, easier ways of working, but also use some of the technology that we have now available around e-auctions, being able to be much more efficient on our sourcing and procurement activities. And I talked earlier about being much more data-driven. We have an extensive suite of Power BI reports, probably like most people here, but we've actually tried to trim that down over the last couple of years to make sure we have the right dashboards and metrics in place so we can really keep tabs on how we're performing as a supply chain. And that was, let's say, the systems landscape. And the other thing we spent a lot of time doing is we've been working with RPA, robotic process automation. And our objective is to try and automate 70% of the sourcing process for our spares and equipment. And we have Holger, who works with us to help us do that. And Holger is a very efficient individual. Last year, he transacted over 300,000 of our sourcing and procurement transactions. And just to give you an idea of some of the things that he does for us, he works in the source to purchase process. So when we have a demand, first look and see, do we have it existing in-house already on the shelf somewhere? Therefore, can I move it? If we can't, do we have it on a catalog somewhere with a supplier? Do we have historical pricing? If not, he'll issue an RFQ to the market. And once we've done that, he can then sort of follow up with the supplier to make sure that it's going to be delivered on time as well. So, we use Holger extensively. It has definitely provided some cost savings for us. It's allowed us to be more compliant with our procurement processes because he follows the rules all the time. And it allows our teams, back to the collaboration point that I mentioned, to spend their time on some of those value-adding activities with the right conversations with the operational teams. So that's a lot of work we've put in as well over the last few years, and we do miss Holger when he has the occasional day off. And then everything was going really well. We thought, this is great, the supply chain is transforming, we're hitting our numbers, everyone's happy. And then Q4 2021 came along, the announcement of a merger. Now, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't a surprise. And the reason it wasn't a surprise is, starting with COVID, we, not just us in the oil and gas industry, we've lived through a lot of change. But specifically for the oil and gas industry, COVID really highlighted the fact there was oversupply in the market. That affected some of our peers. They went into bankruptcy. And of course, at the same time, we have the parallel challenges or implications, and quite rightly so, of the energy transition, ESG, a lot of the topics that we've talked about earlier today. And that has really driven the need for industry consolidation. So right now, at Maersk Drilling, we're in an integration process with a company called Noble, who are headquartered in Houston, to determine what the new co will look like. But once again, it's an interesting process to live through. So my last 3 years have definitely not been boring, but the focus has changed. Our focus now is less around the transformation, disappointingly, but much more about maintaining our business continuity. And as a leadership team, one of our key priorities is around our employee engagement, because when you go through a merger process, it affects every single one of us in very different ways. And every single person, professionally, job-wise, will be affected in a different way. So as a leadership team, we're really trying to work with our teams to ensure that we can maintain the engagement, understand concerns, adjust our ways of working, reprioritize as needed. From a professional perspective, I'm a curious person. It's quite fascinating. I'm also a very competitive person. So I've loved looking under the hood of another company and another peer saying, have we done the right things and have we done them better than them? So I won't say what my opinion is, but that's been very fascinating. Culturally, it's going to be very, very interesting, the journey. We have a company with a Danish heritage, obviously Maersk Drilling. We have Noble Drilling with a very historic, high legacy from the USA. But of course, not to forget, over 80% of our team based in Gdansk in Poland. So we have a big cultural journey ahead of us as well. And then, of course, there's the synergy. That's, of course, why mergers happen. And it's then identifying how will the new company go to market, what is the focus. So it's a very, very interesting process to be going through. So that was quite a gallop through what's happened over the last 3 years. So I'll just leave you with, I think, my reflections of how I think, when I look back, what have I learned? But also looking forward, why do I think we've done some of the right things? And you're probably going to go, you know what? You've not told me anything new, Roop. You're right, I probably haven't told you anything new that you don't know already. But my challenge is everyone doing things in the best way they can? Because supply chain fundamentals never go out of fashion, right? Some of these things, I first learned when I started my career, they're still very relevant today. However, one thing we didn't have in 1992 when I started was the level of technology and sophistication that we have today. And some of that really helps. And so using that technology and data to support the organization, drive our processes, just make us operate and deliver better, we can really do that. And we've really seen the benefits of that. Someone earlier today, and I think yesterday, talked about executive mandate. We committed to some very bold targets, both myself and as a leadership team. I sat down with our CFO about a month or so ago to brief her on my function's performance. She said, "Roop, a year ago when you told me your objectives, I didn't believe you'd achieve them." Very pleased to say we did, but that was great because what it did, it really gave the visibility to the executive team of what we were trying to do, which is a blessing and a curse, because it meant we had good visibility, but it also meant they were very interested regularly. But you know what? It keeps you honest. And some maybe as an individual and as a team, sometimes we need that. It also takes time to build the right team with the right people. And that has been a big learning for me, not just in this role, but my previous couple of roles. And we don't get it right first time, but when we get it right, it feels amazing. It really does. And what sucks right now is the team's going to break up. It doesn't feel so good. But when the team's right, it's right, and it feels fantastic. And the collaboration I've talked about. And finally, these days, we need to be prepared for change in probably 3-year cycles or possibly even less. So that's really what I wanted to talk to you all about. I hope it was useful. I'm quite passionate about it. If you have questions, I'd love to hear them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roop. Clearly very passionate about all the work you've been doing. It's quite amazing. By the way, before we go any further, supply chain fundamentals and fashion are not words you hear in the same sentence very often. So congratulations on that. Now, let's go back to that. So as you said, it's been incredible 3 years. What would you say has been the biggest achievement in those years?
For me personally, is actually getting my function basically a seat at the top table. And people in Maersk Drilling realizing that inventory is not the black sheep of the family. So for me personally, that has been a big achievement. But I think for us as an overall supply chain function leadership team is also that magnified. We're very much embedded as part of the business. And I think one of the speakers earlier, I think it was Richard in the panel discussion, I think he talked about, we turn on the news, supply chains on the news. When we now in the conversations in the office, supply chain is part of it. We're part of the commercial going to market. That's been fantastic and a real transformation in 3 years.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people in this room that can relate to that as well. Now, going back to some of your slides as well, you talked about getting the right people as one of the first stages in the transformation. But isn't that a major challenge in itself right now, just finding the right people, and what makes them the right people?
Oh, great question. You're right. I think people have been talking about the war for talent for a number of years, and I think it just continues to accelerate. It's actually interesting. I'll talk about our office in Gdansk, which we've opened. One of the reasons we chose that location was because we felt there was a lot of really great talent in that city. It has a long history of working in the maritime sector, offshore sector, so engineering expertise. So we really felt it was an area where we would have good access to talent. And so that are some of the steps we took. Otherwise, sometimes it's just luck.
As simple as that. It's just luck.
No, it's not like it needs a lot of effort and investment, right? You need to absolutely know what are the capabilities you're looking for. Does the person and the role fit? And really putting effort into making sure you make that right decision. And I will fully admit we don't always, or as an individual, I didn't always make the right decision. But then we need to adjust to that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, to be honest. I mean, quite often I found that you have to get lucky with people sometimes, and you never really know. Now, going back to your friend Holger, I hope Holger does get days off, by the way. It says you aim to automate 70% of your sourcing. So what stage are you at today?
We are probably about 50 to 60% of the way there.
Oh, okay.
So I think we've made big progress. So we're probably around automating around 40, 45% of our transactions today.
Okay, and you mentioned obviously the time that frees up for the workforce, the human workforce, to work smarter. Can you give us some examples of how those people benefited in terms of what they did with the time that they saved by automating those processes?
Sure. So actually, I think someone again, on the panel discussion, made a comment about just in time, or is now just in case. So actually, the environment we work in has challenges. Things go wrong. When you're working on a rig in the middle of the sea, things happen, right? So we can allow our people to have that time to focus on solving problems outside of the day-to-day, just processing the orders. So that's one benefit, I think. Secondly, like every business, it runs on relationships and collaboration. Being able to have those ongoing conversations and those collaborative meetings is very, very important. And so I think those are a couple of examples where having the additional time, let's say, benefits us. And then, of course, understanding that, okay, through those conversations, we identify ways we can improve.
Okay. Are there any questions from the floor, by the way? Yes. We'll take the lady at the front. Again, if you can state your name and where you're from, and then we should have time for your question as well. Thank you.
Femi Ibrahim from UK. Hi. Very impressive, actually, that you're saying that's 60% on RPA. So I'm assuming this was before the 3 years tenure and it was already in place. Because as much as we say that it is people, because I'm looking at your 3 years with lots of changes that is happening. Of course, we need the right people in the right place to kind of smoothly move towards those. But would you believe that because your Maersk had a lot of technology and a lot of decisions were made, a lot of visibility was there, this 3 years was smooth, at least from outside it looks smooth, because you've managed quite a lot of improvement in these 3 years, not just stabilizing with the change, but improvements. Do you think the technology was probably a big driver in that?
For sure the technology has helped. So the fact that a lot of those standard, daily, everyday, continuous transactions can be managed by, for example, Holger, but also some of the things that we did around our category management team, so using Cooper and Green Meadow to standardize setting up contracts, standardize how we go to market. Absolutely, that helps, right? It just makes hopefully people, it helps them deliver better. I think those supporting tools.
Just one more question down at the front row again, please, Richard. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. It's Jenna Wallace from Johnson Controls. Had a question about your point about setting bold objectives and then committing to them. As you go into a new stage of integration in the new merger, what's your advice for being able to do that? Because as you have a new exec team, new stakeholders, it's always a difficult balance to motivate the team with stretch targets, but then also be realistic and not overcommit.
Yeah, great question. So I guess I kind of did the same again, actually. So if I think about my own situation, so I was, because I guess I talk a lot about what my team has done. They talked about inventory as part of one of the opportunities for the new organization. So I presented to the new co-CEO and COO and say, look, here's what we've done. And I left them with this phrase that if you don't consider this, you're going to leave a lot of money on the table, which you've committed to the market. So again, it takes time to understand, well, what are those numbers, etc. But sometimes I think you just, leaning in and being brave really sort of sparks the interest, and then that comes, then the kind of the team then also sees that, as a leader, I have someone who's passionate about it, and as a team, we know we can deliver. So I reckon we can do this again, because we also have the means to do it. Does that answer your question?
Okay, good. Another great session. Thank you very much, Banerjee.
Of course. Thanks.
I'll take that. Thank you. I'll take that. Thank you.